Good morning. Welcome to the EURACTIV podcast series. Poland is in the news again, this time by attempting to void the broadcast license of the biggest private TV station, one that infuriates the Polish government by being independent, which also means often critical of this government. This TV station, TVN, happens to be owned by the US broadcasting company, Discovery. Therefore, Law and Justice Party, or PiS, by cunning, though ethically and legally doubtful machinations, passed a draft bill proposing only granting licenses to companies not majority owned by entities from outside the European Economic Area. And the US is definitely outside. Sounds complicated, so our guest today is Professor Adam Bodnar, until recently Polish Ombudsman, whom I will now ask to kindly explain the situation. Welcome.
Welcome. I think it is very important to explain what is really happening in Poland, because as you have presented it, it might sound as a very technical issue, but in fact, what is at stake here is freedom of speech. So simply, this whole idea of law came in order to restrict activities of TVN, which is the major independent news station in Poland and major independent TV group with a lot of different channels. And as it happens usually in Poland, the technical solution is used in order to achieve political purposes. Please note that at the same time, TVN is subject to proceedings concerning renewal of their broadcasting license. And for any observer, I would like just to mention that TVN has submitted a request to renew the license 1.5 years ago, and still the case is not yet resolved, and the Broadcasting Council is not going to issue an administrative decision to renew the license. So that's why the law has been proposed in order to create like a legal grant for a refusal to renew the license. At the end of the day, the purpose of this is to compel TVN, most probably, to sell its assets in Poland. It's just to say, listen, guys, if you do not comply with our rules, you will not be able to operate unless you will sell your station, because we have a number of purchases, number of potential purchases, which are state-owned companies.
So how this situation suits the more general media landscape in Poland?
I think that I can present it on my own example. Being the former ombudsman and being the person who is quite critical towards government and some of its policies concerning rule of law, judicial independence, and human rights, I can say that already now I have a very limited possibility to comment on different public affairs. So please note that I'm not invited at all to any public media, so to any media that are owned by the state. The only things they write about me or my mission as the ombudsman is usually a harsh criticism of my work. When it comes to media that are sympathizing with the government or that are subordinated financially to government via different patronage or sponsorship packages, they basically follow the same path. So they do not invite people who are independent. And in fact, the only television which gives a floor, which is interested in covering things from the point of view of a certain reliability and transparency and, let's say, I would even say sometimes rationality, is the TVN station. So takeover or subordination of this television station means that Polish people will lose access to independent information.
From the TV sources, what about the more general media landscape, the radio, the free radio, and the free newspapers? You write for Gazeta Wyborcza. After our talk, you will go to the independent radio station Tok FM.
Yes, there are still a couple of independent radio stations, and I think the one mentioned by you, Tok FM, is the most prominent example of this, and the whole corporation Agora with also a very important daily is an important player in the Polish media landscape. We have also a couple of internet independent radio stations. We have some radio stations with a all-white Poland coverage, but they are not so much active in like a daily information activities. They just have information. They just have a political conversation every morning and some small elements on informing public about what is going on in Poland. But the problem is that with every month, the independence of media and their involvement in political affairs, including investigative journalism, is shrinking. So that you see this process, you see, just a good example is the company Polska Press, which is the owner of more than 20 regional dailies. And this company has been taken over by major oil giant, which is the state-owned company or state-controlled company. And right now, you cannot hear any independent voice there because all the editors-in-chief have been exchanged to people who are more or less belonging to the ruling camp, or at least are affiliated with the ruling camp. So the problem is that we observe this shrinking space, and I don't claim that we achieve a situation that all the media will be controlled. Simply, I think the role model here is Hungary. In Hungary, majority of important media are controlled, and there are a couple of media outlets that are still independent, but they present a little bit like a situation of so-called enclaves of freedom than like a real partner in a discussion. So they do not have such an important impact on the electoral process and on the accountability of the government as they should in a normal democracy.
Where do you think is Poland today on the liberal democracy versus authoritarian state continuum?
I think that we are still somewhere like in the middle. So we are not any longer liberal democracy, and we are not yet full authoritarian country. Fortunately, we are not yet. We are somewhere in the middle. I claim that we follow the theory of competitive authoritarianism. It is a theory presented by Professor Stephen Levitsky and Lucan Way, which says that the ruling party has all different elements to control the political situation and to have a constant competitive advantage over other political players. In Poland, this competitive edge is created via control over public media and sympathy of a lot of private media outlets, or at least lack of deep interest in the investigation what the government is doing wrong by some media, and also by neglecting legal values and by creating a permanent situation of lack of accountability for any decisions that are mistaken. So, whatever happens, which is simply wrongful to the government, you cannot even expect these days that the government will face any accountability for this, even if these are very serious allegations of violation of the law. And in my opinion, this lack of accountability is one of these important elements of the current political system in Poland. And that is why also the government is pushing so much to restrict the judicial independence, because still, whenever some people are targeted, these are courts that provide protection to people, like, for example, in cases of pretrial detention.
I would like to refer to your Gazeta Wyborcza op-ed and what you wrote about the Golden Gate. How have the government managed to do all that? Why have we allowed the government to reach so far?
I think that there are a couple of reasons, obviously, but I think the most important is economic satisfaction of Polish people. Because, even despite the pandemic, majority of Polish people feel that they have a better life than they had before 2015, especially in terms of social spending. So Land Justice was quite skillful in delivering its social promises, and also was taking advantage of the economic growth, which is the process happening not only in Poland, but in whole Europe. And because of this, I think many people feel that, they are not in danger, that nothing wrong happens to them. And so such discussions like judicial independence, or even right now, freedom of media, are pretty abstract to them. Like, for example, I will tell, what is mostly the approach of young people towards this Lex-TVN, so this law threatening freedom of speech. It seems to me that most of them think this way: okay, we do not watch television at all, so we don't care, whether this television is free or not, because we are using internet to gather information about the world. But they don't get it that it is extremely important that anything that appears in internet is basically based on the investigative journalism prepared in independent editorial offices. And second, they don't get it that if the Law and Justice will impose the harsh restrictions on TVN, then the next step will be imposition of restrictions on different internet portals or internet media. So sometimes I think that people do not have enough imagination what may go next, that they think that, it will not be that bad, we will somehow survive. But they don't get it that with every month the situation is getting worse, that we are losing our international partners, that we are, nobody would even, believe some time ago that Poland will be on such a war track with United States. United States was always a traditional ally of Poland, and now it is not. It is not any longer. Of course, there are all those different treaties, including NATO treaty, that bind Poland and US and other countries. But, it didn't happen for years that Secretary of State of the United States was making that kind of strong statements concerning Polish policy. So I think it is quite important moment for Poland.
So the final question, what can be done now from the side of the media, citizens, opposition politicians, from the side of Europe and maybe the world?
I think the answer is always the same in case of that kind of dangerous, so we should do everything what is possible in terms of protesting, writing letters, participating in demonstrations, but also like sharing information why this change is detrimental to Polish freedom and Polish democracy. And second, I think we shouldn't get into that kind of a cheating mode presented by Polish ruling camp, because sometimes they adopt a certain law and at the same time they say, we are going to make some amendment in the work of the Senate. Or yesterday there was a speech by Mr. President of Poland saying that he's so much in favor of freedom of speech that he will defend those values. But simply credibility of that kind of actions and that kind of statements is very low, in my opinion. And second, we should not be misguided with those statements, because maybe it is a pure political, cynical purpose behind those statements, just to chill the dissent, just to make people get into something like a relaxation mode and not to protest. I think that until the moment this law is out of the table and the independence of the TVN station is saved, we should do everything in order to fight for those values, because they are crucial to freedom of speech in Poland.
Thank you very much for this insightful talk. Our guest today was Professor Adam Bodnar, the former Poland's Ombudsman, and until the next time.
Thank you.